We've seen those first huge apartment cities of the Pueblo Indians. To sustain people in these first urban complexes, community farms were needed, and farm crops needed water. This is the legacy of a group of native people called the Hohokam culture, our first land reclamationists. I'm descending into an irrigation canal that represents the Hohokam culture at a late stage of development. Some of these canals were as wide as 25 feet, as deep as 15 feet. Some were lined with clay. One network of canals along the Salt River totaled 150 miles. At one time, these canals carried water to many thousands of acres of farmland, and that was more than 1,000 years ago. The Hohokams proved that man could farm the desert land of Arizona by building irrigation canals. They began their experiments as early as the year 300 B.C. Using stone axes and hoes, the Hohokams developed serviceable canal systems during a 400-year time span. Their skill resulted in extraordinary water engineering projects that were the greatest irrigation achievements by ancient man on this continent. This irrigation canal is part of the first modern reclamation project in the United States. And that project, in turn, is based upon ancient Native American models. Many of the Salt River Project canals in and around Phoenix, Arizona, follow exactly the routes engineered by the ancient Hohokam. The impact of the Hohokam water projects can be seen today in lush farm crops growing on former desert land. Today's Pima and Papago Indians of Arizona are descendants of those incredible canal builders of more than 10 centuries ago. But today, the Pima farmers have replaced Hohokam digging sticks with modern farm implements. Native American contributions in the field of agriculture are many and varied. Corn, or maize, first domesticated in Mexico, is the best-known crop of Indians of the Americas. Among the leading native agronomists were the Arikaras, a northern farming tribe who developed 7 different varieties of maize, including one strain that would mature quickly in a short growing season. As horticulturalists, Native Americans have a record that few races can match, domesticating more than 40 plants. None of the foods cultivated by natives was known to the Old World, including the white potato, which somehow became labeled the Irish potato. All the food on this table was developed by native people of the Americas. Of the world's production of leading food crops, 42% by weight is composed of 3 Native American crops: corn, potatoes, and peanuts. Measured in dollar value, 48% of the leading food and economic crops produced in the United States was domesticated by Indians. That is agricultural impact. It's not difficult to trace the impact of native influences upon the destiny of this nation. You just have to look to colonial times. This is a replica of Fort James, the site of the first permanent English settlement in the New World. When the British colonists arrived at Jamestown, Virginia in 1607, their first task was the construction of the stockaded Fort James on the banks of the James River. Tribes of the Powhatan Confederacy made it possible for the colony to succeed. As it was, the Jamestown colony almost did not survive. There is no doubt that without the aid of the Powhatan Indians, the colony would have perished from starvation. Jamestown was settled 13 years before the Mayflower brought the Pilgrims to Plymouth, Massachusetts. Had the English colonies failed, the United States today could easily be a Spanish or even French possession. But the Spanish had established a colony in Florida, and the French were actively trading in the Northeast. Just as at Jamestown, Indians showed friendship initially to the Plymouth colony, taught them to plant corn and other crops with methods suitable to the climate of this foreign land, and in general aided their survival. Pocahontas, the daughter of Chief Powhatan, was one of the Indians whose gifts of food and advice on crop planting helped the colonists survive the first few difficult winters. Even as Indian corn helped the Virginia settlers survive, another Indian crop, tobacco proved to be the economic savior of the colony. Virginia tobacco became so popular in the Old World that it became the first major export of the colonies. Another Indian woman who contributed to the development of the United States was Sacagawea, the Shoshone who aided explorers Lewis and Clark on their expedition from St. Louis to the Pacific coast and back. America's first business enterprise was trade. At first, trade among the various Indian tribes, later between the Indians and the whites. At first, communication was a problem because there were about 300 different dialects spoken by the Native Americans when white traders first contacted them. A means of communication had to be developed even for intertribal trade. The solution was sign language, developed by the Plains Indians. Many a trade deal was completed by use of signs. The Kiowas were among the most expert in using the sign language. Today, only a few elders of my tribe still remember it. Though the signs are different, the same principle is used today as a visual language for those who can't speak or hear. While there was no written Indian language prior to European colonization, many North American tribes used pictographs and petroglyphs to record events that happened to their people. A Cherokee named Sequoyah invented the first native writing system. In 1821, after 12 years of labor, Sequoyah produced a workable syllabary of Cherokee characters. It was so well received that within months, thousands of Cherokees could read and write their native language. It was through the painstaking work of Sequoyah that the Cherokees were able to produce the first Indian newspaper, the Phoenix. There is evidence that the Cherokees established in 1839 the first free, compulsory coeducational public school system in the world. Peter MacDonald was one of a number of Navajos called on by the Marine Corps to devise a secret code using their native dialect. The code was never broken by the Japanese.
The code was so structured that that even a Navajo would have a hard time decoding what the Navajo code talkers have put together as a code. We made up words such as train. We would say in Navajo, they would mean turkeys having a rain. So if a Navajo listening to that, decoding, a Navajo would say, what does he mean by a turkey having a rain? But our trained code talkers would know that means to train.
Indian impact on our terminology has been considerable. Our trees have Indian names: tamarack, hickory, persimmon, to name a few. Cities named for Indians include Seattle, Chicago, Milwaukee, Omaha, and Wichita. Numerous rivers, lakes, and mountains have Indian names, along with half of our states. Indians have given us words like peewee, punk, hubbub, tuxedo, and okay. In language alone, there certainly has been Indian impact. Native Americans were this nation's first environmentalists, and for many Indians, the buffalo was a major part of their environment. Indians regarded the earth as their mother in a perfect circle of life. Man and the buffalo were only small parts of that circle, and the buffalo was seen as the Indian's ally. It was the major source of food for my people, the Kiowas, as well as for the Arapahoes, the Cheyennes, the Sioux, the Crows, and the rest of the Plains people. The buffalo provided clothing, housing material, utensils, and tools. Nearly every item of daily living for the Plains Indian was a gift from the buffalo. In the 1700s, the wondrous animal, the horse, changed the balance of power in the buffalo hunt in favor of my people. In one day, a single hunter on a fast horse could kill enough buffalo to feed and clothe his family for months. The horse literally changed the entire lifestyle of the Native American. Plains tribesmen became the finest horsemen in the world and tough military foes. On the west coast, the fish was to the Indians what the buffalo was to the plains people, the staff of life. Once salmon were so plentiful, they could be scooped out of the water by the netful. Within my lifetime, that situation has changed, so that there are no longer enough salmon to support commercial, sports, and Indian fishermen. Early Indian technology involved a substance we all know today, petroleum. Of course, the Native American didn't have a car engine to lubricate, but he worked wonders with a substance that was part of the normal environment of many Indians. Now, pumps suck oil from wells to satisfy the tremendous demand. But prehistoric Indians in many areas found it oozing from the ground. 1,000 years before Columbus reached the New World, natives had dug more than 2,000 oil pits in Pennsylvania. In what is now the movie capital, Hollywood, Indians took advantage of the asphalt substance bubbling up from pools in an area we call the La Brea Pits. Prehistoric Indians used the asphalt to waterproof their houses, to seal baskets for holding liquid, as glue, and as a caulking agent for the unique plank boat built by the Chumash Indians. During construction, as each plank was tied into place, a thick layer of asphalt was applied to all edges. Generations of Indians used petroleum for fuel, paint, tonic, bath oil, and face makeup, among other things. The evidence continues to grow that some of the first Americans were passable chemists. You're looking at a piece of flint, a stone highly prized by prehistoric Indians. This particular flint is found only in a 10-mile area of the Texas Panhandle. It's called the Alabates Flint Quarries. Between 500 and 1,000 open-pit mines here were worked by Indians beginning as early as 12,000 years ago. Those people were among the first to employ mining techniques in North America. They had a variety of uses for flint, including axe heads and projectile points. Normally, flint has one characteristic shade, but Alabates flint has a multitude of bright colors and patterns. It holds a sharp edge when chipped and flaked. Alabates flint obviously was a valuable trade item, for it has been found at archaeological digs far away from the Texas Panhandle. Long before whites arrived, Native Americans mined such substances as copper, lead, mica, and coal, while south of the Rio Grande, silver, gold, platinum, and jade were mined. Today, in Arizona, Montana, the Dakotas, Idaho, and Wyoming, Indian people are working to gain control over natural resources on their own lands, some choosing to mine for coal, uranium, oil, and gas, others waiting for hard evidence on the environmental impact of such mining. The native medicine man has been viewed by some as a faker using spiritualistic hocus pocus. However, many of the medicine men were skilled herbalists who regularly used over 200 medicines and drugs that later were included in official pharmaceutical manuals. Moreover, several experts on Indian healing methods now agree that medicine men, with their masks and rattles, had success in psychotherapeutics. They were early psychiatrists. Dr. Robert Bergman of the University of New Mexico Psychiatry Department worked with Navajo medicine men for 6 years.
Well, I was surprised initially at how good they were. I suppose I came with my own share of stereotypes and prejudices, and I had read some that indicated they were of great value. I don't suppose I really believed it until I saw it, and sometimes I saw some very remarkable cures. They were good healers. They were good doctors. What they were best at are things that psychiatrists do today.
There are other Indian contributions to technology. Remember our canal-building friends, the Hohokams? Those amazing people also gave the world this first, the first etching process ever developed. This etched shell, a Hohokam work of 900 years ago, predates the first European etching process by 450 years. Here at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., one can also find out that the Indians discovered rubber and invented the syringe. The snowshoe is a Native American invention. Eskimos devised the parka and other cold weather apparel, along with snow goggles. The Eskimo is now more dependent than ever on his artistic skills. Still using ancient methods to carve ivory and bone figurines, this craftsman, like many native people, must sell his carvings to get the cash he needs for today's economy. Economy and transportation go hand in hand in today's society, and Native Americans have had an impact in both areas. Indians were the first United States map makers. Their sketches showed rivers, streams, trails, and villages. As a matter of fact, before freeways straightened lines of travel, our nation's system of roads was built upon old Indian trails. This is one of them. Transportation on waterways was by canoe, and the maritime masterpieces were the dugout canoes. This 50-year-old film shows the dugouts of the Kwakiutls, a northwest coast tribe. The dugout was as seaworthy a craft as was ever designed. The northwest dugout makers fashioned their craft from huge cedar trees. Prior to the white man's arrival, most small canoes were made from bark or animal skins. They were the models for today's recreational canoes seen on lakes and waterways everywhere. Modern whitewater racers can salute the Eskimos for inventing the kayak. The Eskimos used the kayak for fishing and seal hunting because of its maneuverability, the exact reason the whitewater racers enjoy competing in kayaks today. Design features have not changed measurably since the time the prehistoric Eskimos used them. The impact of this native craft is seen in worldwide sports competition. In the field of art, the American Indian has contributed greatly to American culture and society. These paintings, for example, represent a unique and highly developed aesthetic expression of the Native American spirit. Other Native Americans have worked in a variety of artistic forms, but there has been debate over whether Indian art should be classified as simply craft work. When the prehistoric Adena Indian carved intricate designs on this smoking pipe, he was expressing his artistic desire. When the Mimbres people of the Southwest added paint to their pottery, they were adding beauty to an object they used daily. Maria and Julian Martinez of San Ildefonso Pueblo introduced matte black on black pottery. The totem pole was the crowning achievement of the Pacific Northwest Indian artist. Supernatural beings, animals, birds, monsters, or people were usually the decorative elements. Totem poles originated with the custom of carving designs into the supporting columns of a house. Later, they became symbols of status or memorials to the dead. The stately totem pole combined the arts of wood carving and painting. The Navajo woman weaving an intricate blanket design is an artist. For generations, these women, working in their hogans, have displayed a flair that transcends the mere weaver's craft. The same is true of the Tlingit weavers in Alaska. They were expressing themselves as artists when they worked mountain goat hair and cedar bark into their exquisite chilkat blankets. Indians have been interested in painting for thousands of years. Today, many of the Indian painters have developed bold and recognizable styles, like top Oklahoma artist David Williams, who descended from Apache, Kiowa, and Tonkawa ancestors. Williams attracted national attention after several of his paintings were bought by art collector Vincent Price. Hopi artist Charles Loloma is the nation's #1 native jeweler. He has inspired a new generation of Indian artists to express themselves, and his impact on jewelry design is incalculable. Working mainly with turquoise and silver, Loloma creates his jewelry designs in his studio home at Hautevilla on the Hopi Reservation in Arizona. A school to develop young Indian artists the Institute of American Indian Arts was opened in 1962 at Santa Fe, New Mexico. Founded by Loloma and Lloyd Kiva New, a Cherokee, the Institute has had a number of top-flight artists as instructors, including Loloma, painter Fritz Scholder, and sculptor Alan Hauser. In yet another artistic field, that of show business, the impact of the American Indian has been considerable. Will Rogers was the biggest Indian star of them all. Born in Oklahoma, he parlayed great skill with a cowboy's lariat into stardom as a newspaper columnist, a radio commentator, a movie idol. Will started out doing rope tricks in rodeos and soon gained a reputation as one of the greatest ropers in the world. Rogers performing a Texas skip. Now the rope goes behind the horse and rolls all the way around to catch the 4 feet from the opposite side. It's a figure 8. Notice the rope cross and the horse steps into it. Another variation of the figure 8, getting both the horse and rider. One hand throwing 2 ropes in 2 places. Now 3 ropes, 2 for the horse and 1 for the rider. Will Rogers bridged the gap between silent movies and talkies. He was proud of his Cherokee blood. Will brought his Indian heritage onto the movie screens.
But you are an American citizen.
Well, I think I am. Folks, Indian, both my mother and father had Cherokee blood, you know. Born and raised in Indian Territory. Of course, I'm not these Americans whose ancestors come over on the Mayflower, but we met them at the boat when they landed.
Indian themes dominated the United States theater in the early part of the 19th century. In the late 1800s, several frontiersmen, including Buffalo Bill Cody, organized Wild West shows. Indians were stars in those Western extravaganzas. When motion pictures replaced the Wild West shows, again the emphasis was on the cowboy Indian theme. Unfortunately, most of the films and Wild West shows stereotype the Indian as the bad guy in the screen dramas of the West. Native Americans have always had a flair for drama and pageantry in their dances and ceremonies back to prehistoric times. This scene was filmed in 1914 by pioneer movie maker Edward Curtis.